Hello. How are you today? How are you, Rabbi?
Great. I'm doing well, Chaim. Good to see you. I'm glad to be with you this evening.
Perfect. So we have a very special program tonight, our second Anshe Live. And tonight we're going to talk about a topic that is getting close, one of our holidays. But I think we're gonna approach this topic in a different way, right, Rabbi?
That's the goal. I mean, this year, as everyone knows, has been so different. So why not reimagine the holiday a little bit differently than most of us think about it each year?
Yeah. So we all heard the story of Judah Maccabee, the Maccabees, and the fight, and what happened, and all the stories that you get from religious school to the books. But let's go ahead and dig a little bit deeper. But before we do that, please, everybody who is watching tonight, let us know you're watching. Send us a message, post a comment. Also, share this video so everybody can have a little bit more of this great information. So, Rabbi, to start tonight, where do we start? Like Hanukkah is a week from today, but the nights are getting longer and the days are getting shorter. And every time that happens around Hanukkah. So why is that?
Well, let me just start by thinking about where we are in our world. Right, this year is an incredibly dark time in many of our lives. Right, and probably the last 10 months to a year have been some of the hardest times for every single one of us. And our world is almost a year into being ravaged by this pandemic. And so many of us feel done, down, and ready to just move on. And in some ways, the themes of Hanukkah are perfect for really what we're experiencing at this point in our life. Right? As you mentioned, Chaim, that Hanukkah always falls close to the winter solstice, the shortest day, the day with the shortest amount of daylight in the year. And almost every ancient culture in the entire world has a winter solstice holiday. There's real fear. What does it mean to be surrounded by more and more darkness every single day? And so every culture, and Judaism is no exception here, has created a holiday to coincide right around the winter solstice as a way to give us a chance to look forward. Right? If you think about it, there's especially in the ancient world, right, without the use of electricity, there was nothing scarier in the world for many people than darkness. And as you mentioned, right, so many of us in religious school learned the story of the oil lasting for 8 days, or the incredible miraculous victory of the Maccabees over the Greeks. And those are all great stories, but there's actually another way the Talmud understands Hanukkah. And that's really the story of Adam, right? The year the world was created.
So we're making a big leap. Let's just call it not back in the future. We're going back in the past. So the connection of the Maccabees with a connection of Adam.
Well, not the Maccabees. I mean, right? So one of the challenges that Hanukkah, and this could be another topic of conversation, one of the challenges with Hanukkah is it does not fall in our Tanakh.
Okay.
It is nowhere in our Bible, the story of Hanukkah, right? It's in the book of Maccabees, but that is not considered a book in the Jewish canon of our Bible.
Yes.
So one of the challenges of Hanukkah has always been is what is the story? And in fact, the rabbis ask in the Talmud, my Hanukkah, why even celebrate Hanukkah? And so that's kind of where all of this comes from, is there's all these different narratives.
Okay.
But one of the very first things that one of the accounts in the Talmud says, Adam in that first year of creation, no connection to the Maccabees, just Adam and Eve are created. And Adam sees the days are getting shorter and shorter. And he believes that the creation that God had just completed is being undone. That the world that he's lived in now for a few months is about to be over. And what does Adam do at that moment?
That's a very scary feeling.
Think about it. If you didn't know how the world operated, right? Yeah. That the days were going to get shorter and shorter and shorter until they get to a point, and then they got longer. He was petrified.
But even right now, like every year we get that seasonal, I'm not going to call it a seasonal depression kind of thing, but when the days get close, smaller, shorter, and the nights start, it affects us. And we know what happened. We know what happened. We know every year we go through the same, and we have electricity, we have light posts in the streets. And now if we have to put ourselves in the shoes, well, did he have shoes? But Adam, life, the world was just created, and now the sun is not coming out that often or that long like it used to. That's scary.
Yeah, and he notices it's getting shorter and shorter, and that this whole idea of creation is about to end. He must have been petrified. And what does he do? He decides to fast and pray and change his way. And he decides that by doing that, he can affect the course of the creation of the world.
Wow.
And lo and behold, the Talmud says, he does. The days all of a sudden start getting longer. And it's no coincidence. In just a couple of weeks, the days are going to start getting longer again. Right? And so there's this idea that we're in this moment of darkness, right? Both figuratively in the world that we're living in, as well as what we're feeling every single day, as you mentioned, Chaim, right? The days are getting shorter. You have to keep adjusting when your lights go on, right?
Yeah.
And things like that. And the message in some ways is, there's light coming. There's light at the end of the tunnel. And I think, in some ways, that lesson of Hanukkah, which we don't talk about so often, is really the key to how I think so many of us need to focus on Hanukkah this year.
All right, Rabbi. So we have a few people saying hi. So buenas noches, good night, good evening. Good evening, Rabbi. And evening. Dan and Debbie Cohen are saying hi. Gilda Soccer is watching, and Ricky says something that is, it's an animus feeling, what we were just discussing. So, Rabbi, if we look at that story of Adam and we look at ourselves today, and I'm gonna have a side note, and then we keep going with the topic. But if we look at ourselves today, what we're living, and I think we can make some connections to Hanukkah. And I think, we have discussed this, like this Sukkot was going to be a very different Sukkot, and it was. And in my opinion, it created more chances to engage with my kids in the sukkah, where I would have been doing more communal stuff, which is great too, but I had a very different experience. Pesach, a holiday that we had just weeks after the pandemic started, and now we get to Hanukkah. And many of us have felt this darkness, this cloud, this going around, and it feels like we are in a dark place. And we now are hearing news that are good news about vaccines, about the way that doctors are treating patients, but at the same time we still hear bad news. Can we have a correlation of what we are feeling to Hanukkah and make this Hanukkah a more spiritual, not just that idea of eating latkes and lighting the menorah or the Hanukkah?
Well, I mean, yes. I mean, you're right. I mean, yesterday was one of the darkest days. It was, in terms of, fatalities, was the darkest day in our country to this point, right? We lost, unfortunately, more people yesterday in the United States than we have any other day.
Yeah.
And yes, you're right. There is light hopefully coming, right? That the good news that we hear about the medical advances are only a few months away, perhaps, from affecting many of us. And I think Hanukkah, in some ways, is exactly that, right? One of the key things that I would think about is as you light your Hanukkah each night, is what do those lights, what do those candles really symbolize? And I think, to go back to this, I'm going to I'm going to combine a couple of the stories that I just told us a few minutes ago, not that are separate. Yeah. But I think it's wrong of us not to understand them all in relationship to Hanukkah. So if you think about the story of the oil, right? The cruse of oil was found, and it was this tiny little bit of oil. The miracle is it lasted for 8 days.
Yes.
So if you think about that, when would the largest flame of that oil be found? On the first night.
On the first night when you have more oil.
Right. And then the smallest, you'd have this teeny bit of little flame that remained on the 8th day, right? Before the new oil was made.
Yeah.
And in fact, if you think about, there was a very famous debate between two great rabbis, Rabbi Hillel and Rabbi Shammai, who often fought about everything, right?
Yeah.
And the debate between them becomes, Hillel says, we light 1 candle the first night, 2 candles the second night, 3 candles, and so on and so forth, all the way till the full Hanukkah is lit on the 8th night with 8 candles. And Shammai says, no, the miracle was we had that cruse of oil found on the first day. We have 8 candles lit the first day. Then we go to 7, 6. And the miracle is on the 8th night, we have 1 tiny flame left. And in some ways, Shammai's argument makes a lot of sense and probably should be the way we should do it.
Yeah.
But we don't. Obviously, all of us know we light 1 candle and move up every single night. And why? And the answer that's very clear is we're not interested in decreasing light. We're only interested in increasing light and increasing goodness in the world.
Wow. Yeah.
And so if that's the message, then here we are today, feeling dark, feeling gloomy, right? Ready. The world is different in so many ways than all of us could have expected a year ago at Hanukkah, and really feel depressed in some ways, many people. And the message I would say as you light your Hanukkah is to remember Hillel's point. We increase light. We don't decrease it. So every night we're going to increase it, and we're a little bit closer to moving on to a new stage where we can bring more joy and happiness and hopefully get a little bit closer to the world that we knew a year ago.
You know, that's a great point you make. And I think it would be an exercise that every one of us should do this Hanukkah. Just make a mental picture every night. When you light, the shamash and the first candle, you have, let's just call it a percentage, a 10% of light. And when you get to the end, 8th night, you're going to have 100% of light, because you're going to have all the candles on, and you will see that basically the holiday, what it did is what you mentioned. It generated light in your home. Turn off that light and just let that light shine, in another word. Yeah. Now, Rabbi, before we continue, I'm going to say something to everybody that is watching. So one of the things that we're going to do today is, so we are doing a different approach. So we are learning a little bit. The goal is that we learn something, Rabbi, and I hope that you also will learn something about what I'm going to share, which I did some research. And the beauty of Hanukkah is that Hanukkah is celebrated around the world, because we have Jewish communities around the world. Not Jewish communities of today, but Jewish communities of 100 years, 500 years, 1,000 years. And they have created these customs, these little traditions. So I'm going to ask for everybody who is listening and watching right now to start thinking about what customs they have at home. Either they brought it from, the old country, or where the region their family is from, or they have created some kind of new custom at home with their kids, with their grandkids, with their brothers, sisters, siblings. So we're going to share that in a moment, and we would love to hear from you a little bit about your own customs, Rabbi. So that would be great. Rabbi, now, I think that, as you mentioned at the beginning, we talk about Hanukkah not being one of the big holidays. It's not a major holiday. I'm going to make a side note, and it's not a part of the topic today. We sometimes, and I say we generalizing, we want to make it a big holiday because there are big holidays around us during this time. that does not take away the meaning of Hanukkah, whether it's a big or a minor holiday. But let's talk a little bit about that, Rabbi. About what lessons in our life can this minor holiday have?
Well, it's not it's always been called a minor holiday, somewhat because what I mentioned to you a few minutes ago,
Yeah.
right? That of where do we find the tradition, the roots of where Hanukkah comes from, right? The other minor holiday that many of us associate with is Purim, right? But Purim, unlike Hanukkah, is actually found in the Tanakh, right? There's the Megillat Esther, the book of Esther. It depicts the story of Hanukkah. The story of Purim for us. So Hanukkah has always taken a bit of a strange place just because of where do we get the tradition, the root of it from.
Rabbi, is there any insight of why Hanukkah did not make it to the big book?
There's some legitimacy questions to the book of Maccabees. I mean, right? And I believe the only books that the book of Maccabees, I believe, is in the Apocrypha, if I'm not mistaken, right? Which is only accepted in some Christian communities to begin with as a whole. So there's some just questions. I'll leave it at that, right? But that's not to say that we can't learn from the book of Maccabees, and I've taught about this before, and I probably will do it again, right? Like, what is the real story of Hanukkah? And there's two very different opinions in the book of Maccabees that two of them that we've already talked about. So that's one. But just because it's a minor holiday in terms of questions, we've celebrated it for thousands of years.
So it's nothing new.
It's nothing new. It's, and we're going to say a commandment. We're going to say Baruch atah Hashem Adonai, right? That God commanded us to kindle these Hanukkah lights, right? So we are commanded to do this, right? It's a mitzvah to kindle the Hanukkah lights next week and for the following 8 days. And I would say just because it's minor in terms of that, right? It's not Rosh Hashanah, it's not Yom Kippur, but in some ways the lessons of Hanukkah, some of the other ones we haven't even talked about, right? The fight against anti-Semitism, the fight against assimilation, the fight against religious freedoms, right? That we normally associate with Hanukkah, as well as this idea of finding light in the middle of darkness. These three lessons, I think, maybe the three most important themes that we've celebrated in any holiday, or at least more personal than any theme we celebrate of any holiday throughout the course of the year.
Yeah.
Right. And so it may be minor in stature, but in terms of importance to our lives as we live as Jews in 2020, I don't think there could be a more important holiday.
Well, and if we look at that way, it's a very existential holiday. It goes to the core of existentialism. It's what we are, who we are, and what we fight for. Is that fight, in the time of darkness, it's the core of fighting anti-Semitism. So it's as you say, it's very important to see it that way. That it's not a minor holiday. That is not in celebrating the book where it's in the Tanakh, but it's a holiday that creates a lot of spiritual meaning.
Right. I also think some of the minor holiday significance of it takes place because of the whole December dilemma issue, right? That, we don't want to be, this isn't our major holiday per se. So, people have tried to minimize it. But I think at the same time, that does us a disservice as Jews, right? Let's talk about why this is a significant holiday to us as Jews and as individuals. And that doesn't negate that there's another religion that's dominant in our country that has a beautiful holiday to celebrate at the same time.
Wow.
It's a different meaning. It's a different religion.
So Rabbi, we get to the point that we're going to talk a little bit about customs around the world. And as I mentioned a moment ago, and Bonnie already gave us a comment about her experience, and I'm going to put it in a moment, but let's just chat a little bit. Let's just go ahead and mention her comment before we go, because I think it's a pretty comment. It's a very important one. Bonnie mentioned Hanukkah became most special to me 6 years ago when my brother was released from Cuba. We all know the story, and we're thankful of his release. And it was on the first night of Hanukkah. and how, we can connect that straight, what Bonnie mentions is straight to the message that you were saying.
As you brought that back up, and I saw Bonnie's post, I actually got chills. I remember that evening, and the Hanukkah celebration that we had at Shul that year. I think it was either the day of or the following day. I can't remember exactly, after Alan's release from Cuba. And it really brought meaning for so many people to the experience, right? That he'd experienced hell. I mean, darkness.
Darkness. We cannot call it anything else. Darkness.
Right. Yeah. And to know that he was free and was home on American soil, that light, it brought to life everything that we're talking about right now, and is the story of Hanukkah.
Yeah. All right, so let's go ahead and move in with some of these, Rabbi. And you're going to tell me, what do you feel about it? What do you think about this? I'm going to bring it up. This is going to be like one of those TV show games. I'm going to give you something, and you're going to tell me what you think about it. I'm going to tell you, this is very dear. This is Sarah's family, Halabis. They're from Aleppo. And you have to be very explicit. You cannot just be Syrian. You either are from Damascus or Aleppo. You're either Halabi or from Damascus, because they get angry. So Halabi Jews from Aleppo, they have a very, very, very distinct tradition. They are the descendants of the Sephardic Jews that fled Spain in 1492. And when they got to Syria and they felt safe, very different Syria than today's Syria. 500 years have made a lot of changes to that. But when they felt safe, they vowed to light an additional shamash on Hanukkah as a sign of thanks. And this Hanukkah, we might adopt that tradition. What do you think about that, Rabbi?
I mean, it's beautiful, right? I mean, the other candles, and I'll talk about this in a few minutes, right, have a special significance, right? Mm-hmm. But the shamash does not, right? So the idea of adding additional light, right? Mm-hmm. Finding it as a way to say thanks or appreciation, or what a beautiful approach to the Chanukiah and to the lights that we're kindling, right? And again, what is, going back to kind of my opening statement, what is this whole point about, right? About the lights and really that debate between Hillel and Shammai, right? Mm-hmm. Bring more light, right? Yeah. It's dark out. It feels terrible in life. So we all need to find that extra hope that we can find this year, and in many cases, most years, but it's certainly exacerbated this year, and so many people are struggling in so many profound ways. Yeah.
All right, so I'm gonna give you a different one. This is probably for all the wine lovers today. They might adopt this one this year. So in France, in the Avignon region of France, very well known for their wines, so the wineries, they have a custom that at the end, it's customary to end the Shabbat that falls during Hanukkah by opening a new bottle or a cask of wine. After Havdalah, Jews will travel around their neighborhood to various homes, tasting their wines and toasting to the holiday. And I think that this is a fantastic way. Now, today might be different, and you will do it in your bubble. You will not go around the neighborhood, but you can start this year with this, because I think it creates a very joyful tradition, a very happy tradition, sharing with the community, sharing with your family, opening a bottle, a bottle of wine. When you open a bottle of wine, you symbolize happiness and joyful event.
Yeah. And you make kiddush on it, right? And so, beautiful, right? Who doesn't want to drink more wine, right? And in fact, the Psalms includes a line that wine gladdens the heart. So, it's dark. We're upset. So, we need to do that. I'm not saying you have to go out and drink the bottle of wine, but we need to find ways to increase the light and darkness.
Jay is going to start that tradition at home this year.
Well, see, now people are going to get through 8 bottles of wine this Hanukkah, right?
Sherry says we can open one for each room in the house instead of going around the neighborhood.
Exactly. People are going to have fun with this.
Bad ideas, Rabbi.
No, I'm not going to turn anyone to do that. But in seriousness, like that's what we all do. Anyways, right? Think about the gelt and the dreidel and all sorts of things that we've been our customs for Hanukkah, right? You asked me, like in our home, so I'll go out of order, right? Like tell us, like after we light the Chanukiah, we sing and do the silliest dances you can imagine. These 2 dances that really came from Talia's family. And it's, why? To add joy, to add laughter, to have fun, right? And so if the wine is a way to do that, and especially I understand in the wine region of France why they would want to do that, it's beautiful. And again, brings joy, brings happiness, brings light to our lives.
Yeah. Now, in Judaism, we have these, I think it's our duty. It's just impregnated in making connections. So I'm going to tell you the tradition in Italy. And I think it's it's a very deep, meaningful, very spiritual, very existential tradition. And so, Rabbi, what do we know about Tisha B'Av? Just briefly. Don't give me the rabbinical answer.
So Tisha B'Av is the saddest day in our Jewish calendar. It's the day that both temples were destroyed first by the Babylonians and then by the Romans.
And that day was studied, but almost in complete darkness, just with a little light, right?
So it's traditional that the evening of Tisha B'Av, when you read the book of Eicha, the book of Lamentations, and you sit on the floor, very much like you do in mourning, and you chant this book, and you do it usually by flashlight. Now, most people do it by flashlight today, but or candlelight was a very common way of doing that.
All right. So what if I tell you that in Italy, certain parts in Italy, the Jewish community, what they do is that the candle they use to read the book of Lamentations, they save that candle and they use that candle as the shamash in Hanukkah. Because Tisha B'Av is a day, as you mentioned, the destruction of the 2 temples, and Hanukkah is that rededication of our Jewishness. Right. And it connects the saddest moment in Jewish history, the destruction of the temple, with a happy rededication, victory, winning, joy, light. So we bring darkness, out of darkness, we bring light by using that same candle.
Right. I mean, there couldn't be, that's an unbelievable tradition. I mean, in just how perfect it is, right? Here you take the destruction of the temple, and if you read all of our prophets, right, they're basically saying, it will be okay, right? How their entire world after the destruction of the temple was destroyed, right? And they've been exiled from Jerusalem, and the prophets are basically telling them, it'll be okay. Yeah. We will return, right? Yeah. And then Hanukkah is not only the rededication of the it's the rededication of the temple, right? Yeah. After it had been ransacked by the Greeks, we rededicate the temple. So you sit remembering the destruction of the temple, using the same candle that we commemorate and celebrate the rededication of it with. It's full circle, right? In every generation, every time in our history, there's been a moment of terrible darkness, and then we come around and we make it a beautiful moment, right? There was even some people experienced the destruction of the first temple and the building of the second temple in the lifetime. Right? And that's the experience of what we inherit, and what better way to bring light to our life than to think about to put those 2 moments together.
All right, so look what Gilda says. The Italian tradition makes so much sense. Love the connection. So I gave you an array of different customs. So if you have one, if you're watching right now, and if you have one in particular, the rabbi already mentioned the one that he has at home, the silly dance. Rabbi, we need to see that silly dance. Are we going to see it in public, or it's just a private silly dance?
No, I think we've even done it at shul once or twice at part of the Hanukkah lighting. So if sufganiot and apple cider is not enough of enticement to come to shul this year, maybe we'll unleash the dance at one of the Hanukkah lightings at the shul.
And we have great programs, and there's been a lot of emails, a lot of information going out. We have great programs. The programs are going to have all social distancing. And please come. We will be all separated, but we will be all together, at least to see the lighting of the Hanukkah. And Rabbi, so we talk about some of these practices. There are all many other different traditions. It's not just potato latkes and sufganiots or donuts or apple cider. Sephardic Jews fry burmuelos or buñuelos, which is dough, and it's eaten with a syrup. It's very good. Many Jews in Latin America has adopted, the ingredients of the land, and you have to take these plantain latkes. Are incredible. Potato latkes are your thing. You will probably be in love with plantain latkes. They are amazing.
Sign me up.
Deb sent, give us, and I'm going to put the message, and I'm going to take it off in a moment. But she has this tradition with her first child. There was a gift of a menorah, Hanukkah, and each first night it goes around whatever the child is involved. It's a piano menorah, the goldfish menorah, the skateboard Legos. So they have taken this menorah and go through the years. Basically, you name it, all of these different ones. Cynthia mentions to us that she had incorporated Puerto Rican cuisine with Polish, Russian, Irish for Hanukkah to honor her husband, who is from Puerto Rico, and her Eastern European traditions. And she cooks something different each night, kosher Rican, with some cabbage and potatoes in. So that's great. That's the beauty of it. We keep that. And I think what we see a lot is that the message is the same, whether it's with the food. We're frying food. We're doing that thing that connects to each other, whether it's different. But we also creating these new little traditions, and we passing them down. And I'm sure, Rabbi, I'm going to make a bet that your great grandkids will be doing that silly dance.
I'm sure.
So, look, we have also, we wish we could do the anshe this Hanukkah. We need some plantain lacquer recipes. Well, we can, one of these days, we will do one of those latke tastings from around the world. That might be a good idea. So, sure. Rabbi, while we get some of those messages, and if you're watching us, let us know you're watching. Say hi. We would love to know that you're watching. And we will put your message on the screen. And if you have any comments about your traditions or anything about Hanukkah or any questions, what time will we have? We have the rabbi here, to answer any questions you have. But in the meantime, while we do that, Rabbi, so give us that idea that Hanukkah, the candle, the speciality of that candle, what's the meaning of the holiday?
Well, the whole idea of the holiday is really tied up in Persume Nisa, publicizing the miracle. And, the miracle, we'll leave it as what is the miracle. It goes back to, what we were talking about. Is it what reason is the miracle? But I think the important thing here to remember is that the candles have a special purpose, right? Mm-hmm. That the candles are actually not supposed to be used for anything else but to publicize the miracle.
Yes.
And so, in some ways, that's why the shamash is there, right? Because you're actually not, as beautiful as it sounds, traditionally, you're not supposed to read by the light of your Chanukiah.
Okay.
Right? Because the Chanukiah is supposed to publicize the miracle, the light.
It's not just a candle that you'd like to get light in that corner of the room.
Correct. Unlike a Shabbat candle, right? A Shabbat candle, you could use the light of, in some ways, that's part of why the Shabbat candles were started, right? Is you could light Shabbat candles right before it got dark, and you'd have a light in your home, right?
To eat dinner, to study, to read at night. Yeah.
Hanukkah, no. The point is actually that the Chanukiah is not supposed to bring the light for your, let's call it your everyday, your mundane activities. The light that the Chanukiah gives off is for a special holiness. And what is that holiness? Right? It's the exact thing that Hillel and Shammai were talking about, right? Their argument. It's to bring light not into your home so you can see whatever you're going to do. It's to impact your soul, right? It's to publicize the miracle, whether that's the miracle of the people walking down the street that the Jewish people beat the Maccabees or whatever it was, or as you look at it this year and you see, oh my gosh, those flames are bigger tonight than they were last night. Oh my gosh, those flames are touching my heart and my soul to remind me that this pandemic will hopefully in a few months from now be a thing of the past. That whatever that darkness that you're feeling at that moment can be temporary, right? That go back to that story of Adam, right? That first creation, the year of creation, right? He thought the world was coming to an end as the days were getting shorter and shorter. And what did he learn? And what do we all know now when we get close to the winter solstice? As horrible as the day I hate most is the day we end daylight savings time, right? I hate that it's dark at 5 p.m.
Yes.
And what we do, right, is, and so Hanukkah it's the same mentality, right? That darkness is temporary. It will soon start the days will soon start getting longer again.
Yeah.
And life will return.
Yeah. Joy
will return. And now the question is how do we make that happen to ourselves in the midst of that darkness, in the midst of the feeling that we have?
Uh-huh.
And that's the lesson of the candles. That is really the lesson of the candles, that they are meant not to help you read your book, but to impact who you are and how you feel about yourself and the world that we live in and what our future can be.
Well, Rabbi, what a great message to conclude tonight. And I think we all should take that to heart. And this Hanukkah, in a week from today, we have the first night. I think we should look at that Hanukkah and see that special meaning of that first candle, the second candle, the third candle, and see how that light grows through the week, and see how that room gets filled with light that we're not going to use for anything else but to fill our hearts and our soul of the meaning that darkness will pass, and we have to keep going. And I think that we try to absorb what's going on and find meaning for it. But I think that this Hanukkah this year, as how you put it, the way of going through light in this time of darkness is teaching us that light will come back and the darkness will get shorter or smaller.
It will. Yeah. The natural order will return in the cycle of the sun, right? Yeah. And let's pray and hope it returns in our lives as well, and certainly in this course of this pandemic.
Well, Rabbi, thank you very much, and thank you for everybody watching tonight. Do you want to send one last message to everybody?
Really, just wishing everyone a wonderful Hanukkah. I hope that that this year, as much as so many of the holidays have been different, that as you alluded to, Chaim, before, that you find your own special ways of making this year's Hanukkah something that impacts you, that you'll remember. And I hope that all of us can find a little bit of joy and happiness and make a little bit more light come into our world, both individually and communally in the days and weeks and months ahead. So I wish everyone a wonderful Hanukkah, and I hope you enjoy.
All right, and stay tuned. We have a series of programs, starting the year with these Anshe Lives. And we're going to have some exciting topics that we're going to discuss. And we're going to try to find some spiritual meanings to different topics. And thank you to everybody. We have some last thank yous. Rabbi, I'm going to go back again. Candy, Cynthia, Ricky, Susie, and Richard. The whole thing. Thank you and sending us nice messages. Bonnie, happy Hanukkah to you. We have another message from Michael. Thank you, Rabbi and Chaim, for this enjoyable session. Happy Hanukkah. Adriani, thank you very much. Happy Hanukkah to all. Happy Hanukkah. She loved the program. Great. So we did a good job, Rabbi. So
Great,
Sean,
Chaim.
please stay tuned. You're going to see some messages in the few weeks, and we're going to have some great topics. The Rabbi is working really hard.
Yeah, I think we're getting together about once a month to do this, Chaim, right?
Yes. So the next one will be in January. Do we have one in December? No, we have one. We have one in December, right?
This is December. We're in December already. The next one's the first Thursday night in January, I believe.
Perfect. So more information will go out and with the information about the topic and everything. So we're looking forward to it. Again, thank you, everybody. Rabbi, thank you for giving us this time, this insightful information, very, very spiritual and very meaningful.
My pleasure. Happy to do it, Chaim. Thank you for organizing.
Bye-bye.
Laila Tov.